And I'm sitting here thinking they had to unpack that to move forward. I mean, if you stuff an old tuna sandwich in a backpack, it's only going to keep getting nastier until you bring it out, release it, air out that backpack, and then you can actually use that backpack maybe for something great in the future.
Welcome to the Unconventional Leadership Podcast, where we help you unlock your potential as a leader. Thank you for joining this week's episode of the Unconventional Leadership Podcast. You get the pleasure today to join a conversation with myself and Megan Leasher. Megan is an esteemed faculty at the Talent Magnet Institute. In fact, I think it goes back over 5 years that when Megan and I were introduced to one another. And we're going to unpack even a little bit of that journey for you today. Megan is an expert in measurement, in talent development, in organizational design, and very much looking forward to the conversation as well as the questions that you all have submitted for us to discuss today. So, Megan, thank you for being with me in the studio, back in the studio.
Yeah, thank you, Mike.
We've done some episodes before.
Yes, very excited to be here.
Excellent. So one of the things I think is most helpful to get started is to share a little bit about what your jam is. What do you get up every day excited about to tackle in the world, whether that's professionally or personally, and just kind of, introduce ourselves to the audience joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely. So every day I love to get up and help people, whether it's individuals, teams, organizations, feel more confident about what they're already thinking about and already want to do to the point that they just do it. So whether it's a coaching conversation, a one-on-one conversation, and someone has an idea and, I'm not sure, maybe I want to do this thing. And I'm like, yes, do the thing. And, sometimes we just need an extra reassurance, an extra boost of confidence. So I like to help people move in those directions because when they try something new, they're growing, they're learning on their journey. And sometimes it just takes one other human supporting them, and they can mobilize in a new way. And so that translates to teams. Maybe it is org design for a team. Maybe it is building out leadership development. Maybe it is doing a training program. It could be anything. You're mobilizing teams in new directions. Maybe new teams are forming. Lots of different scenarios. And then when you think about it from an organization standpoint, very strategy focused. So how do you help them get excited about what they're already thinking about that they want to do and give them the confidence and maybe some action plan to help them get on that journey, implement, and feel like it's going to be a success.
Where do conversations like that get started for you? And when you're approaching someone to help them take on the things they need to be doing or want to be doing and have within them the skills to do it, but they come to you and say, you know what, I'm a little bit more timid than I feel like I should be for the team that I'm on, or I don't know if I'm quite bringing my best every day. And I'd like your help as a coach to really help me gain that extra confidence.
Yeah. I don't think it necessarily comes to me in sort of that full transparency. Quite often it's, I want to do this thing, but maybe my boss isn't on board. Or maybe it's a little counter to the culture of the team or the organization. So there's sort of this preemptive resistance that the person's feeling. Or maybe it's something they've never done before and they feel like they need the roadmap. I would say quite often it's one of those situations. Like, I know I want to do this thing. I know I need to do this thing, but I know something or someone isn't going to be on board and or I don't even know where to start. So I would say that's most often the conversations I have with leaders is, well, what might one next step look like? What would a first step in that direction look like? Or it could be a question like, what don't I know that I need to move forward? Who's somebody who might be wildly helpful that I haven't considered yet? So those light questions that kind of move people in a direction of tiny mobilization. Smaller goals are always more successful. We hear that. So as a coach, those are the kinds of questions that I'm asking. But I would say that's where it comes from. Like, there's just something in my way, but I know I need to go this direction. help me do it. And it's my job as the coach to uncover what's the real obstacle, what's the perceived obstacle, what's the mindset of the person that I'm talking to. Is it a fear of failure? Is it a lack of confidence? Is it I tried this once before and it didn't work, so maybe there's some past baggage. There could be an array of different things. So,
do you find the lack of confidence? How does how do you identify that as the coach? How do you help them identify that? And then what do you do about kind of increasing the confidence level within the leaders you support?
Yeah, I think regardless of whether that confidence or lack thereof is a transparent thing we're talking about, or I'm just sort of gleaning it from the conversation, I think one of the things that's really helpful is to ask people questions. What's in your way? What's stopping you from taking the next step we just talked about? And you can start to unpack a little bit about what that hesitation is. Yeah. And quite often, it's not what people expect. I could be talking to a coaching client and they could be like, oh, I've done this a bunch of times at other organizations. And then I'm like, well, what's stopping you now? What's stopping you here? What's stopping you in this situation, this moment? And, you could get something back as a coach that's like, well, gosh, I never thought about it. What is stopping me right now? I guess I have this person on my team that's just going to block it and be a pain. And I'm like, oh, okay. And quite often when you get something like that, that client is just as surprised they shared it and realized it as I am as the coach hearing it. So I think that's the big part of being a coach, is asking the questions that help unlocking things that people don't realize are bundled up in there. Maybe we've got some past, present, or future preemptive baggage that we don't know is in there. Yeah. And a coach can do a great job of unlocking that. And quite often, as soon as you unlock it and set it free, well, let's tackle it. Let's figure it out. So it's kind of that next step that moves everything forward.
And how does a manager and or a sponsor play a part in that conversation?
It's huge. It's huge. In a coaching conversation, sometimes as a coach, you get clients directly because that individual might personally or professionally need some help. But then sometimes you get coaching clients through organizations where individuals are identified as needing additional support. Maybe they're moving into a new position. Maybe they're facing some obstacles that weren't there before, whatever the case may be. So however that client comes to you, knowing that their manager, who is the person that they're accountable to, that is the person that's hopefully driving their growth, their development, supporting them, is openly on board, is very, very critical. And as a coach, I love to have conversations with the manager before you kick things off. If the client is going to be there as well, sometimes that's a great situation. Have all three of us. Sometimes maybe it's a little better to just have the manager. Every situation is different, but I think it's also great in longer coaching engagements to check in with that manager midway through, as well as the coach kind of doing a wrap up at the end and saying, where are we now? What's next? I, as the coach, might be stepping away, but that doesn't mean growth stops. So how does this person take it from here?
Right.
So talking to the coach, as the coach, talking to the manager directly is so critical, but making sure that client's talking to their manager too. So when I'm in coaching sessions, I will often say, well, what does your manager think of this idea? Or what kind of reaction did you get when you shared it? So I always make sure those touch points are built into their homework, because that individual manager, sponsor, whomever is part of that, even though they're not literally in those conversations, because they're a key driver on that journey for that person.
Have you found that occasionally you run into a scenario where the individual getting coached, his or her goals are different than the manager or sponsor who identified they'd like to provide coaching to said individual? Have you ever felt like a little bit of a mismatch?
I have at times. Most of the time when that's happened to me personally, it's been a situation where the manager has said, hey, here's 3 areas of opportunity this person could work on. Okay. And then you talk to the client you're about to start the engagement with, and the client says, well, I know I need to work on these 3 things, but you know what I really want to use you for? I really want to use you for public speaking or project management or something very specific that they're just like, I've never gone here and I need this and I would love to start this with you. And when that happens, normally there's an acknowledgement of, I agree with my manager that I could use some help in these areas, but could I use you to do this other thing? And I'll go back to the manager and say, hey, I hear this great acknowledgement that you guys are clearly on the same page about opportunity areas. However, here's what I heard. What do you think about this direction? And I've never had a situation where the manager has said no. Sometimes I'll get a little bit of a yes, but can you also maybe tap into one of these other opportunities too and do a little blended? And it's a bit of a negotiation, and you can't fit everything in to a coaching engagement. But it's always been a positive back and forth that's happened when those moments have happened to me.
Is there a length of time, like the amount of time commitment from the individual, from the sponsor? What do you think is ideal? We get asked that a lot at the Talent Magnet Institute. What do you think is ideal to actually support change and growth in the leaders and team that we're trying to invest in?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. When it comes to one-on-one coaching, I'm a big fan of 6 engagements. You're having a session maybe every 3 weeks to maybe a month, depending on scheduling. You don't want them too close together because you need to give that client an opportunity to practice new behaviors, do a little homework. And sometimes that homework might be, okay, the next time this situation happens, you need to respond differently.
Right.
So sometimes in the homework, you have to wait for the right moment to materialize in that client's work or professional or personal life even, where they have to use the new behaviors and respond differently. So you're kind of waiting for something materialize. Sometimes you're waiting for somebody else's schedules. Like, we're working on, I'm helping someone with project management and building out a plan. And, I'm not going to have that conversation with that team or that person until this date. And so you want to make sure to schedule the next coaching after that date. So quite often there's some natural calendaring or happening that takes place. I would say roughly 3 weeks to a month is what I've seen in terms of the work I'm doing with my clients. I feel like some coaches might say more closer to the 2 to 3 week mark. I think it's a little different depending on what you're working on. But overall, I think it's about 6 months because you need the time as the coach with your client to unpack really what the roadblocks are, and then you can start to get into motion. And sometimes it takes a few sessions to really say and see, like, this is how I'm in my own way.
Right.
Or this is how I'm struggling. Until you get to that place, you're not changing anything because you don't know what you need to change. So,
and that can take a few sessions to
absolutely
even acknowledge or have a light bulb go out. There's this level of chemistry connection that I say, even with facilitators, sometimes it takes the first 2 sessions just to really build some innate trust to get people to open up and share what's really ultimately going on or what they think are the real important topics. But I don't want to lay this all out on a table session 1, right?
Exactly.
Because I need to make sure that you're okay with how I'm delivering it and that this is a safe place. We have found that multi-year, if you do 6 sessions and a multi-year 6 sessions every year, you can really build upon. It's like planting building blocks. And we do annual, we'll do 12-month, we'll do 9-month. Anything less than 6, I think it just the efficacy and impact, it could be lacking.
You're not going to get any traction.
Right.
Yeah, you're barely unpacking what's going on.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's what, and I know we're seeing it now. We're seeing some renewals happen where people are like, you know what, I really want to go ahead and do another 6 sessions for the calendar year, but I'm open to at the end of that re-upping, or we're going to do 12 months. And we've had to even say but you need to use those in a certain time period because you got to build the big mo. You've got to build momentum with a coaching engagement.
And there's accountability built into it too.
Right.
It's like, okay, by next session, we're going to talk about this, or I want to hear how this other thing went. And, you had mentioned about going back and having additional sessions. I love having 6 months of coaching with someone, step back 3-4 months, and then someone coming back and saying, hey, I'd love to jump back in again because maybe there's something new, or maybe they've made some growth and they want to push it further. There's always situations like that, but I love the breather. I think some coaches get nervous about that because like, oh no, I'm losing a client or it's at risk. But I think you need that time to practice and play and reevaluate what do I feel like I'm strong at now? Where do I think I need to go next? What are my opportunities that are truly holding me back?
Right.
And sometimes you just need that breather time. So when a coaching client comes back and is like, hey, I want another, let's jump in again. I can't wait to catch you up on what all has happened. I get so excited because it's a continuation, but it's a fresh start to a journey at the same time. I love that so much.
And it shows the opportunity, the connection and relationship you have with a coach. And I'll also say even the word mentor, there's a place and time we're trying to profess that coaching is great for everyone, right? That you look at the high performing, mid performing, and low performing. Any athlete in any scenario has a coach. We think professionals should too. That why would you go through your desire to get education or go straight into a profession and never again get support on things to make you stronger and help you build new skills? That sounds very lonely and very isolating, which is technically the way the world does it, right? So we're trying to profess this engagement of coaching is all about just continuing to support you and who you are and who you can become. Back to the phrase unlocking human potential that resonates so well. So we're trying to build a culture where teams are like, I am going to do this facilitation exercise. I am going to do some strategy work, but let's invest in our people. Let's actually take a next step and show the investment. And very rarely, I'm trying to think back the last 5.5 years, very rarely do people get off the bus when their organization is actively investing in them, right? Because it's like, wow, they see the potential in me. They believe in me. They want to support me. This is the kind of culture I want to be in.
And they're also enabling me to have a private, intimate, personal conversation that they're not getting access to in order for me to be better. So there's a huge trust element there that, my company believes in me so much and wants me to be better that they're allowing me this personal, private time that they're not going to hear about in the spirit of trust that they're going to make it be a better place for themselves, their team, their organization. That's something that I love about coaching because that's a huge, huge trust element.
So one of the hardest parts about podcasting is the moment you stop talking. I mean, think about it. The majority of the work that you probably put into creating a podcast is in the editing phase. So what if you didn't have to do the editing phase? Here at the Cincinnati Podcast Studio, we help you just come in and talk. We do all the rest. We have the cameras, we have the microphones, we have the lights, and then we have the editing tools to create the perfect content out of your podcast. Not only do you get the full podcast in video and audio, you also get short form content that you can use across all of your pages in social media. So if you want to learn more, go to CincinnatiPodcastStudio.com/tour to learn more and schedule your tour with us today.
So Dr. Leasher, you're helping Talent Magnet Institute from the very formation of this vision, by the way. Before we ever incorporated as a real company, think through the word impact. So one of our, big, hairy, audacious goals is that one day Harvard Business School was going to do a study, or Harvard Business Review is going to do a study on TMI, because Talent Magnet Institute has proven the way that we're coaching and moving organizations forward is actually having sustainable, holistic, human-focused impact. So we've built we've built a foundation, a data layer that everything we're doing, whether you're interacting with our asynchronous platform, you're getting coaching, facilitation, strategy, mentorship, you're in one of our new leadership development programs, you're in a mastermind program, you're just utilizing us as an outside resource to come in and share and give insights, that we're helping you, your team, and your organization be holistically healthier and we actually unlocked human potential. So we're trying to measure this at the very base level of every interaction that organizations have. And we would not be measuring this without your leadership. What do you see when I just tied in here's a real mission that we're on of creating transformational measurement that says I typically say like the industrial revolution way of working isn't working. And the last 25 years of data collection by all of the big players will show you that it's basically flatline. Like no matter what we do, we go, even the implementation of HR tech has actually been, I argue, almost more hurtful than helpful because of lack of action that organizations take once they collect the data and once they have the information. So can you help the audience hear a little bit about how you've been helping us put in this data layer and what you're most excited about regarding it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a great journey, and I always forget it was before you were even incorporated. So I love being there from before the official beginning. So, you mentioned all the different things that Talent Magnet does. So there's different modalities. And from a measurement standpoint, you have to think about those different modalities. So the types of things you want to inquire about someone's coaching impact is going to be different than someone who's on an asynchronous learning platform. That's going to be slightly different for someone who's part of facilitation, going through strategy design, a CHRO mastermind, and all of the future things that haven't been created yet in Talent Magnet. So you have to think of those modalities because each one of those is a different scenario. Coaching is a repeatable private conversation over time. Facilitation is a group-based, often in person, quite often isolated episode or moment. Masterminds, cohort-based projects are going to be repeatable group, often in person, sometimes virtual. So you have to start with the modality and what makes that modality unique and what are the types of questions that make sense based on what it is, what's the event or series of events. So that's the first thing we really had to think about. And where I have a lot of fun is what are questions that we could ask people that would apply to any of those? Any of those at all. And as a measurement designer, that's where it gets tricky, but that's where I have a lot of fun because if I can write 10 questions that would apply to any of those, we can use those across any situation. We can compare and contrast. You can also say, hey, we're getting more impact for our clients out of facilitation than out of coaching. What does that mean for our own strategy going forward? It helps you from a business standpoint, communicating back ROI. So modality is absolutely number one. Then from there is who are our audiences? Because there are the people who are receiving, so people who are the coaching clients, part of the team where facilitation is happening to them, being presented to them. You have your individuals going through the learning platform. So there's the people who are actually the direct consumers and benefiters of the types of modalities Talent Magnet is using. But that's not your only audience. You've also got the immediate manager. So we talked about that in relation to coaching. You have that manager who is hopefully lockstep supporting, aware of that individual client's journey to help move them forward. When you think about it from a facilitation standpoint, that manager has to take things forward from whatever that team facilitation does. Maybe you uncover strengths and opportunities. Maybe you do a SWOT analysis. Maybe you're doing some strategic planning. What happens after that facilitation? That manager has to run that from that point in time. So your stakeholder perspective changes. But then you've also got your client owners or your buyers or whatever you want to call them, the main individual, the senior leader that you are working with, quite often your budget owner, who is saying, hey, has Talent Magnet as a whole helped my people? Help me understand this, Mike. So I know that this is a great continued and hopefully expanded investment for our organization's future. So you've got the different audiences in there too. So it creates, from a measurement standpoint, all these different layers and nooks and crannies. But you want to know so many things, but from a question standpoint, what's palatable? You know, we hear about things like survey fatigue, interview fatigue. How many questions are too many? Right. What method of getting that information is going to feel welcoming versus delete the email, ignore the text, it's probably spam, those sorts of things. So how do you make it a welcomed environment to respond? How do you make it physically attractive from an interface standpoint to respond? And then also, how do you ask those questions in a way, to your point, that people are actually going to do something with it? And that's the critical piece from a measurement standpoint. You know, was this a great experience? Yes or no? Okay, good question. Gives me some insight. What do I do with it? If I say no, I've left no door open as a designer to tell you what to do next. So I have to be thoughtful in terms of the questions from the modality, the different audiences, as well as, you know, what action can be taken based on what just comes out of this one question. And maybe it sets you up for a next question, and that's okay. But thinking about how we present that information, how we ask for it, how often we ask for it, also critical. So all of those different nuances, it's like all kinds of different gears working together, sometimes in opposition, but finding that core set to help you as an organization know what you're doing great, how you communicate that back to your clients, but also how do you all build your strategy for where you need to go next, or where you could do better, or where you need to dive in and say, we are doing amazing here. We got to double down on helping companies here. So it's all of those things together, and really where those things converge, that's where I get excited. I have a lot of fun, and it's a great challenge. It's a great challenge. So it's been fun to be part of it from day one.
Well, and one of the things I share with people is we're not just trying to measure the articles you read about, right? So we're not trying to measure the actual word retention. We're trying to measure the attributes that contribute to, right? Yeah. We're not trying to measure just individual performance. We're trying to measure the attributes that help people perform more effectively. We're trying to measure not are they fulfilled, but what are the attributes that help individuals actually know, am I more fulfilled here doing what I'm doing today? And is this helping me get even more fulfillment out of the work because of the growth that's going on inside of me, right? So I like to say that part of unlocking human potential sometimes is helping people like recognize their actual potential, and these light bulbs go off. Sometimes helping people show up to be more promotable actually has to do with increasing their confidence, removing their own negative self-talk tracks that exist within inside of them, helping them see that their knowledge that they would bring to the room is actually needed and wanted and desired, and then giving that individual, that manager, that director, that VP, the internal empowerment to go, you know what, I am going to share this. And then next thing you know, we hear feedback from a hiring manager or from a team that like, they're just coming to the table differently.
Yes.
They're just showing up differently. This question that she asked in this meeting is like, we're all thinking it, and you're the one who asked the conversation, right? Those are the kinds of things we're trying to measure that actually show up to say, you know, am I in a healthier work environment? Do I believe that the organization's helping me become the best leader I can be and the best human I can be? Do I believe that they care about bringing my whole self to work, or is it just, you know, something they said in the original interview, but they really didn't want all of me. They only wanted a compartment of me. And they're not helping me become a better version of myself. They're helping squeeze more juice out of the lemon, right? And we're trying to bring breath to where that lemon tree blossoms. And there's so much other things going on that lemon tree that, my gosh, you should get public speaking experience because you could be our next communications director or something. So is there anything you've picked up on as you've tried to align to our flywheel around the talent magnet flywheel other questions we're asking that you feel are unique to us versus what others may be asking in their various data sets? What makes us unique?
It's those attributes, and you said something really important. So when you think about the attributes that are leading to things like unlocking performance, unlocking potential, they're antecedents. So you mentioned a couple like confidence, but we're asking the questions that are unpacking that person that leads to action, that leads to growth. Do I feel confident to do what I need to do or want to do? Do I feel supported by my organization's culture, by my manager, to do the thing that I want or need to do? Do I feel prepared? Do I have the skills? Am I excited about this direction? Do I have passion here? I think the word engagement gets overused a lot. But if you think about, am I on board with this? Do I just feel good that this is the right next step? These are the questions that we're asking that are the antecedents. They're the attributes that make somebody show up differently in a meeting, that makes them take charge in a situation where maybe they didn't, that makes them put together a plan where maybe they were hesitant before. And those are the things that lead to unlocking potential, yielding new performance, yielding accelerated performance, that I think is really important that we jump into, that a lot of organizations don't. It's those antecedents.
So good. And that's part of our core team, our esteemed faculty, our kind of our senior faculty advisors that are working with us, our board, our investors, even our clients that know this is what's really going on, right? There is nothing more powerful than hearing from a client, and this happens often, which is attached to those mission moments, right? When you get a call from a client who says, this particular individual, we knew she or he had it in them, but that extra layer, that extra bit of coaching and support that we're providing them through TMI, or that team building facilitation where you're working with 18 people in the team, all of a sudden, she's showing up so different that we're actually going to give her P&L responsibility and give her a big promotion. There's a couple individuals, we try to track promotability. How do you help people get more promoted? We've had people get promoted 3 and 4 times in the last 5 years.
Wow.
Because of this experience of just like liftoff, right? For me, it's like, we knew they had it in them. All our goal was is just a little bit of that refinement and giving them the confidence to fly, right? And we're measuring this. We want to have a more profound impact that we went from dealing with individuals saying, I wish we would change, I wish we could do something different. We have one client who 4.5 years ago said, you know what I'm going to do? The next 10 years, I'm going to invest in my people.
Brilliant.
And that's going to be the strategy. That same client shared with me recently, kind of knocked on the virtual door and said, hey, I have a question for you. I followed up. Is it okay that we completed our 5-year strategy in 3 years? What should I do for the next 2? Is it okay is hey, wow, huge accomplishment. Okay? Is it okay to go ahead and launch another 5-year strategy when we still have 2 years left?
Always yes.
But we just achieved the 5-year goal in 3. And the answer is absolutely. And by the way, let's celebrate what you just asked, right? And let's make sure the whole team knows that this is why we're here. This is why we exist. This is why we're doing what we do and why we're going to continue. And you know what they did? They doubled down this year on more coaching, more resources, more strategy work to just keep elevating to new heights, right? The other thing that's fascinating to me is that their succession plans have become even more clearer to them not because they're saying we've got a gap, but it's you know what? We're going to actually, who on your team do you think could literally replace you in, let's say, 3 to 5 years, 3 to 7 years? And let's invest in them. It's not rocket science. It makes us go, yes, this is why we do what we do. And people think, well, of course we should do that. But the question is, are you doing that?
And there's something so fascinating, like you were telling the story, we finished our 5-year strategy in 3 years. Can I start another strategy? That just seems like the most obvious yes, right? But that individual came to you. There's this element of an outside expert always unlocks something. So you think about as a spouse, what does your spouse nag you about? And you're like, yeah. And then some random friend or somebody of yours is like, hey, you should do this thing. And you come home to your spouse and you're like, I should do this thing. And your spouse is like, what are you doing? I've been telling you that for 5 years, right? Like we've all had those moments in relationships. You think about your kids don't listen to you, and then, another parent of the kid's friend says the exact same thing, and the kid comes home and was like, I'm going to do this. This is amazing. And you're just like, what just happened? I've been on your case about that for, 5 months or whatever. Coaching and consulting is the exact same thing. Yeah. Sometimes it just takes an outside person to say, you can do it. What's stopping you from doing it? Go for it. There's something kind of funny about it, but having that outside expert inherently give you permission and tell you what you're doing is right or has merit or has validity or power.
That's right.
There's something about that unlocks in people. And it's one of those nuances of humanity that I've always been fascinated by, but coaching's a great example.
And we're studying this. Mm-hmm. So one of the things, for example, that we talk about in our platform and through some of our videos and our tools, our resources, is micro-affirmations. Mm. So we believe that one of the ways that you do this and one of the uniquenesses of our equipping the individuals in our database and our clients is helping them understand the skill of micro-affirmations. Because one of the things that a coach does, that a facilitator does, is point out the positive.
Yeah.
There are many times where people who are in leadership do not focus on the positive enough. Mm-hmm. So then you bring this positive into the equation, and all of a sudden someone goes, well, you're right. I should do that.
Yeah.
If a individual in your life doesn't layer enough positive, your, quote unquote, emotional bank account isn't full enough to take out a negative. But those positive affirmations we can use in all aspects of life. I've had to use it in my skills with my 3 teenagers. And I've had to learn it as a leader. Like, well, I do this at work. I do this with teams that I support. I do this to build belief into what we're trying to build, which is some of the hardest work a visionary can do, is instill and breathe positive energy into the room, right? Yeah. Well, I need to be doing that with my children. So there's always things that people can critique in every aspect of life, whether you're an adult, a young child, a teenager, a grown child, a manager, a new team member to an organization. But if you start walking around dropping positive affirmations, all of a sudden you find out that that person heard it, and the individual who receives it goes, that was really nice. This is the first time anyone's ever said anything positive to me, right? So it's just the dynamic of unlocking potential is there's a major equation to confidence, belief, and security. I feel secure. If you have belief in me, you must see something in me.
Yeah, you noticed me.
Right?
Yeah.
And there's this level of confidence that shows up. I mean, it's literally like a rose blooming. It's fascinating to see. I do often say, I wish it weren't rocket science. But for some reason, I've spent 24 and a half years seeing behavior and now noticing the CEOs and leaders who accomplish greatness do it because they instill this belief in everyone in the room, so much so that they actually accomplish something. Yeah. And it's fascinating to me. So we talk about it, and we will get feedback that says, I've never heard of micro-affirmations. Wow. This positive psychology, we're trying to instill skill, which shows up in our coaches. We want to have coaches and faculty on our team that we're doing this awesome thing together. It's more than just delivering content material that I believe in. it's helping those in the room see themselves differently and show up differently. I was in a recent team building workshop, and there were 3 sessions. And the first session, I kept applying a little bit more pressure in the room because there was something that was going unsaid.
Like an undercurrent.
And you could feel it. The team who I was leading, they knew it. They knew it.
You just weren't privy to it.
I just wasn't fully privy to it. And I find this happens often in change management, in acquisitions, in integrations, and in overall change management. But the outside perspective can feel it, so everyone else can. So every new team member you put on this team, they're going to feel it. Let's acknowledge it and let's work on it, right? Then session 2 happened, and it created quite a bit of tension, like to the point of like, oh, we're going to go there. And the floodgate opened with response from both sides. It was kind of like a multi-sided pyramid of conversation where
Safe
there's
permission was
more
granted.
than 2 sides, more than probably 4 sides of all that could be true and possible and holding us back and creating disagreement, misalignment. But by the 3rd session, we took all of that messiness. And after that session, someone called and said, I hope you're okay with that meeting, to me, the facilitator.
Oh.
Because it felt like we may have wasted your time. And I said, well, tell me more. And they said, well, we got into stuff that like, we should have done that offline.
But you didn't.
And my feedback was, that's exactly why we're here. Yeah. The 3rd session created movement, created goals, created actual calendaring of how we're going to roll out what we learned around, I'll call it a topic of change management that we didn't do, that we could have done. But if we listened to ourselves enough, we all had the answers of what we knew was causing tension, delay, fatigue, burnout, disconnection. There was this disconnection. And we can feel that. That's, again, why you bring a third party in. I knew a little bit of what successfully has been accomplished by the organization. What I didn't know was, oh my gosh, they've been this successful and there's still something that's got the gear stuck. And our goal was just to give it a little grease, support it, say it's okay to work through this. Don't stop.
And I love how they felt bad, like they had wasted your time. And I'm sitting here thinking they had to unpack that to move forward. I mean,
That's right.
If you stuff an old tuna sandwich in a backpack, it's only going to keep getting nastier until you bring it out, release it, air out that backpack, and then you can actually use that backpack maybe for something great in the future. So I think they often think, oh, I have to have everything together and in alignment and perfect for when the facilitator comes. It's like the people who clean their house before a housekeeper comes. Like it's that similar element. Like no, we want the raw, we want the dirty, because that's how we help you move forward.
Our mission of connecting businesses with the talent and resources necessary to help you achieve your vision and unlocking human potential are what Centennial and Talent Magnet Institute have been all about now for a collective 55 years. Centennial celebrates our 50th year, TMI is going into our 5th year, and we are ready to help you and your team get to the next level of strategy, vision, and achievement. Feel free to reach out and send us a note, and let's have a conversation.
And the one thing you said earlier about the micro-affirmations for, like I do this in my work all the time, but I had to learn how to do this for my teenagers. You said something really powerful there, and that is, when we have opportunities in one area of our life, they quite often translate to other areas of our life. So I think that's something really important in coaching and in facilitation and working with teams. If you have something that you're working on in one area of your life, like you said, micro-affirmations for your work life, do I need to show up differently in this same way in my personal life?
Yeah.
I think it's a really important question. And when I coach, I always bring the whole person into my coaching. And not every coach does that. That's a style choice on my end. But if I'm working with, say, a client that has a hard time finishing projects at work, and they always start things up and things never come to closure, and they get all excited on the front end and then it doesn't happen in the back end. And I'll say, what does your garage look like? What does your wife nag you about? Whatever way I can ask it. And quite often I'm going to get, oh, I've got unfinished projects all over the place. We can barely walk through the house. Yeah. We're like, okay, so now I understand that there's a greater thing happening here, and that any work I help this person do could unlock them in multiple aspects of their life. Yeah. But I have to ask those questions, and I have to think about, how does it impair their personal life, even though I might be there to help move things forward in their professional life. I can't help them in one way if they're stuck doing the exact same mistakes in another aspect of their life. So I think that's something that we're saying here, even though we weren't really saying it yet, is that people are whole people, personally and professionally, and they bring that to all elements of everything they do. And we as coaches and facilitators have to understand those dynamics interplay in multiple arenas. And how is it manifesting? We have to ask those questions in order to unpack and move forward.
Yeah, and I would say that what you just shared is innate to who Talent Magnet is. So for example, if a coach, and there's a part of it that I respect, I do disagree, but I respect if you say, you know what, I only deal with professional things. I don't agree with it. I'll respect it because it's someone's opinion.
Absolutely.
But I think that's where we've done the world a disservice, because we say, oh, nope, wait a minute, that's personal. You're not, we're
You're not my
crossed
therapist.
the line.
Don't go
I'm not
there.
your therapist.
Yeah.
And it's like, there is a place for a therapist.
Absolutely.
But there's also a place for a coach who really cares, right? So our team cares about you, and it ties into the client I was talking about earlier, who was so thoughtful enough, because they know how much we care about them, that they apologize for unpacking something. And my comment was like, that's literally what I'm here for. Why is the world set up in a way regarding work that the disagreement that ultimately is going to get you to full steam ahead has to be apologized for? Like, it's okay to go through the tough part, right? It's necessary. It's not only okay, it's necessary. And that's what we're here for. So we want to understand the full picture.
And sometimes the answer to that full picture is in the other arena of their life. So if I'm working with a client and they're having a tough time finishing projects, and I say, oh, what does your garage look like? And they laugh and, oh, it's a mess and blah, blah, blah. I might say, well, how does your husband or your wife or your roommate or whatever the situation is, how do they nag you about it? What's that conversation like? And sometimes something can come out of that that I can be like, did you hear what you just said? That this person said this and it leapt you into action. What does that mean for your job? Yeah. That worked here. How do we apply that there? Yeah. And we don't think across those realms a lot. And it just seems so obvious as a coach. And a coach knows when, okay, we're getting to a place of therapy and I got to call a timeout and a redirect kind of thing. But for the types of things we're talking about today, expanding those arenas and saying, are you making progress in one area? Awesome. Who's helping you there? What are they saying? What action is it translating into? Now, how can we take that into the other arena? Yeah. And that's, there's a lot of ahas to be had there, because we naturally compartmentalize those two aspects of our life. And it just seems to be a very human thing to do. But I think, in my coaching, I find it important to merge those together, because sometimes we learn well in one and not as well in the other and don't realize it. Like you're saying, like, oh, I have to give affirmations to my teenagers. Right. Brilliant. Right. It's probably been right in front of you the whole time. You didn't realize
there could be a scenario too where you're watching, where you're listening, and you're thinking, I need that. I know that with a little bit of someone either holding me accountable, being direct, sharing another perspective, taking the time to really hear me out, because sometimes I don't, you could be listening going, sometimes I don't feel like there's anyone that actually hears the whole situation out and then comes back and says, you know what, based on what you shared, I can understand how that's really frustrating or how that's limiting your behavior and your self-beliefs and your this and that. But this extra perspective that has experience, it's simple, but it's also very complex. Human behavior, psychology, we are all very complex beings. We have a lot going on in here that impacts here. We have a lot going on in here that impacts our actions that show up every day. And you may be saying, like, what do I do about that? And I just wish I could hit start. I want to start something. I want to do something different today. And that's why we exist. It's that easy to say, I'd like to start something. I don't know exactly where to start. You don't have to have all the answers. That's what we do. This is why we exist, to help you unlock your own potential, the potential that exists in your team. You may be going here like, we hired really well.
Now, what do we do with them?
What do we do with them? Yeah. Why are we bumping into this thing and that thing? And why are we I want to hit. Now, I tell people often, like, if you have an amazing strategy that you're like, we all believe in it, but once again, we didn't achieve it. There's some development that needs to go on there. There's some magic that needs to take place. And that magic is coaching, team building, facilitation, investment in those resources and in those amazing humans that you have the privilege to employ and you have the privilege to work around. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
A question I have for you, the phrase artificial intelligence and generative AI, and how does that weave into leadership and how does that weave into talent development?
It is, as I look at AI as a coach, as an organizational psychologist, as an HR person, all those different labels I would put on myself, it is like having a super smart best friend who won't tell any of your secrets. So I see organizations using AI in so many ways at scale, which is phenomenal. Hiring better, screening better, training better, all of those things that can help at a very, very big level. But what I think about is the leader that has to have their very first tough performance conversation. Mike, you're not getting it done. I don't know what's going on. Get it together. Let's move it forward. How do I say that in a constructive, positive way that lets you know I mean business, your behavior has to change, but I'm also here to support you on the way? That's a great use of AI. I think of those first-time leaders who maybe never got any sort of training or insight as to the things they're going to deal with. You're going to have tough conversations. And, I listened to another one of your podcast episodes talking about wanting that culture where you feel you can be vulnerable and transparent. Like, I don't know how to have this conversation. Well, maybe you're such a new leader, you don't know if your culture's, the one where you can ask that kind of question, like, hey, I don't know how to have this conversation. Or maybe it's a culture where you can't ask that question. Great use for AI. Go straight to your favorite AI platform and say, I'm a new leader at this company. I've only been a leader for 2 weeks. I just found out I've got an employee that is slacking majorly, and I don't quite know what's going on. Help me find the right balance of the questions to ask so I get at the true problem, but also things I can say to be extra clear that this isn't okay, you got to shape up, but I'm here to support you to move forward effectively. You could literally put all of that straight into an AI platform, and it would give you all kinds of great ways to frame a conversation, language that maybe would be firm, supportive, effective, powerful, resonate. And I love to put things like that into multiple AI platforms, see what differences I get in responses, see what differences I get in terms of resources. So I love AI as a single person feeling stuck in situations where I could use some extra help. Now, maybe AI doesn't always give me the confidence or feeling prepared or some of those things we talked about in unlocking human potential. But wow, to just give me some words, give me some questions, give me a way to frame a conversation. You could even put in there like, I've only got 10 minutes for this conversation. Like, line it up well. Think of having that as a first-time leader, not knowing what to do. You could potentially start off in such a better place versus making all the millions of mistakes first-time leaders tend to make. Right. That's one of my favorite types of examples, tough conversations, how to ask great career development questions. I'm bringing on a new person to my team. I've never hired someone before. Here's what we do. Here's the job description. Here's my company. What might an onboarding plan look like? Maybe you're in a smaller organization where you don't have an HR person and it's all on you as a leader. Yeah. They might not know what to do. It's a very common situation. Yeah. Solopreneurs, small organizations, whatever the case may be, completely new role, even in a bigger organization. Those are the types of wonderful things that I think leaders should really be tapping into and just feel truly grateful for. But I don't know that leaders realize they could use it that way.
Yeah, and
I know some do, but I would love for that to be more commonplace.
And you've shared, I kept thinking that's the prompt, like the prompt you literally shared about. And I think you also made a post of a recent conference you were a part of where you said there was something around like the new one of these important jobs in the future is going to be prompt engineering.
Absolutely.
Right. And you laid out for our audience, for our team who's tuning in with us today, actual prompts to layer the conversation, like keep asking the question and formulating the context and delivering the types of messages and the ultimate goals you want to see as an outcome, but also those additional goals that you want to make sure are included in the conversation. It can take all of that into consideration.
Absolutely. The prompt engineering is so critical. I'm not an expert here, but I love helping people get started. So I partner with Don Parks at the Business Access Hub at NKU, and they host regular AI boot camps for people who are using things for the first time. And I get to be a coach with a table and say, they're playing with prompts and say, okay, well, what did you ask? And then, what did you get? It's kind of like opening a Christmas present. Like, what did it tell me? What did it tell me? And then I'll look at it and say, what? Do you like the tone it came back in? Maybe you want it to be more formal. Maybe you want it to be a little sarcastic or witty. Maybe that's how you talk. Maybe that's how you want to come across with a particular person. Maybe you want it to come back in bullets versus paragraphs, structurally. Go back and say, oh, I love this. Can you give it to me in 4 bullets? Oh, I can do that? Yes, you can do that. You can do that. So helping people learn how to ask what they need to initially ask, but then give the AI feedback. This is awesome. I'd like bullets. This is awesome. Fewer words, please. This is awesome. Make it sound more positive and peppy, like marketing. Yeah. So what's the feedback that you can give to the AI to keep honing it in to be exactly what you want? Yeah. It's a beautiful thing to be able to help people with for the first time. And of course, I'm learning too. Every time I get to help someone else with that. So great opportunities to learn those things for the first time, apply it for businesses, apply it for your personal life, apply it as a leader. Right. And I get to learn a lot as a coach.
Yeah. One of the things that we're going to be working on at Talent Magnet Institute, I was meeting with a variety of minds and that coming from different angles. Talent Magnet Institute now has 5 years of created intellectual property, data, documents, resources, guides, tools, podcasts, videos, an entire digital learning platform that has all of what we believe is like the ethos of holistic leadership, right? So how to unlock human potential. There's all of these data inputs that we've crafted. So we will be at some point releasing a Talent Magnet chatbot that is infused with all of our content and material so that when you're asking these coaching questions and this leadership questions and these strategy questions and this internal development and that there will be some additional influence coming back and backing up with additional, you should check out this episode and what about this resource? And here's a great learning that we have from a TMI, Talent Magnet Institute perspective, which then can be like plug and play for our members and our database and our clients to like, you know what, wonder what TMI would say about this.
Yeah.
And being able to engage in that. So we're going to be building that out.
Amazing.
I don't know how long something like this takes.
No
I
idea.
don't know what the time frame is yet, but there's a lot of, I would say, positive pressure from our advisors and board members and investors and clients to say, like, what's next, right? This is another next chapter. So can't wait. Little scared, little,
But think
nervous.
what it could tell you. Think what it could tell you. You're putting in the whole existence of TMI and saying, tell me about my company. Tell me what we've done in the past 5 years. Tell me how we've changed. Tell me how we've grown. Tell me what we care about now that we didn't then. Like, you could ask some really cool questions about your own brand identity in those kinds of things. One thing that I think is really fun as a career coach is to tell people, put iterations of your resume into
Side by
AI
side. Yeah.
and let them know, what year each is from, and say, how have I grown as a professional? What are 3 words you would use to describe me today that didn't apply to resume version 4 years ago?
Yeah.
You can do things like that, and it's kind of like sort of crystal ballish. Tell me about myself. So there could be some really incredible gifts in that discovery.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you for being a part of this conversation
Thank
today.
you.
We invite you to share thoughts and perspectives as you listen to this episode. What's coming to your mind right now as we close that you wish you could have a little bit more information on, or you wish you could ask? You wish you could raise your hand right here with us and say, you know what, Dr. Leasher, Mike, I'd like to ask these questions. Megan, what would you say about this, right?
Yeah.
So give us that information, because we're out here, we're waiting, we're listening. We'd love for you to send that over to us.
You are our outside experts that
You
we've been
are.
talking about in this
Yes,
episode.
that's correct.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us for this week's episode. And I want to thank the Cincinnati Podcast Studio for once again bringing us some amazing content and helping us deliver this message to you in a very unique form and way. We want to thank all of our advisors and relationships, our esteemed faculty, for all that you're doing to help unlock human potential.